A lot of news to go through here. Let's cover some of the stories. So while the big news yesterday was that Biden picked Kamala Harris, and we will cover that in future episodes, including Kamala Harris's attack on free speech. Remember that journalist who was covering Planned Parenthood? That they raided his house and made his life hell? We're going to be covering that in future episodes. But here's the stories that most people aren't talking about right now. First up, let's cover the vaccine coverage. First up, let's cover the vaccine coverage.
It may not be a Cold War arms race, but Russia and the West are clearly in a race to get an effective COVID vaccine into the arms of people around the world. Russia calls this vaccine.
Wow. So they're invoking the moon race, the moon missions between the Soviet Union and the United States, which I think was a big propaganda move where it was basically just space propaganda from two big governments. And because they were fighting, it legitimized both of their efforts, when I really think they were working together trying to keep the peasants down. So Sputnik, they invoke here. They also make an arms race joke. Remember the arms race was the nuclear bomb buildup? Except for this time, they're trying to race to fill people's arms with needles or something like that. You just saw the clip. Let's keep watching here how they try to link it to the space race, the moon race. And remember, Trump is Mr. Space Force, so he is as much involved as anyone.
Vaccine Sputnik V for vaccine, a not-so-subtle reference to its first victory in the early space race.
They call it Sputnik V?
Kremlin insists its vaccine is safe and mass distribution will begin in October for the Russian population. Vladimir Putin's own daughter has reportedly received the vaccine, developing the virus's antibodies. But Russia has not yet published any of its scientific data and has not begun critical phase 3 human trials. U.S. experts, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, are skeptical.
Wait, so Fauci is a vaccine skeptic now? Because it's the Russians' vaccine he's skeptical. Let's keep that in mind going into a few months from now when they're pushing their vaccine, which is equally as experimental and untested. And they're going to tell us that it's not experimental anymore, that it's been well tested. But there's no way for them to know that. There's no way for them to prove that with a 30,000 person study for a few months. It's ridiculous. And so Fauci is skeptical about the Russian vaccine. Me too. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go along with his when he's pushing one in a few months.
Russians have actually definitively proven that the vaccine is safe and effective. I seriously doubt that they've done that.
Dr. Michelle McMurray Heath represents.
I seriously doubt it too, and I'm going to doubt it when you say it too, Fauci.
America's biotech drug makers.
There's been a lot of skepticism that maybe the Russians didn't do their due diligence on this vaccine attempt.
Well, the skepticism is warranted at this point.
Oh, the skepticism is warranted at this point. The skepticism is warranted at this point. So when they say it's okay, skepticism is warranted. It's like a stoplight. Red light, green light. It's warranted, not warranted. We'll tell you when skepticism is warranted, and we'll tell you when the science is settled, and we'll tell you that vaccines are safe except for when the Russians do it. And we'll tell you all this stuff, and like Trump's about to tell us, oh, the FDA is the gold standard. So everyone just take whatever they approve in haste.
We really don't know what it is they're testing, what it is they've seen. And at this
Exactly. We don't know what they're testing. We don't know what they've seen. And this applies to all of the studies going on. There's a lot of stuff they're not even looking for. So how could they see it if they're not even seeking it out? So keep this in mind when the narrative inevitably changes to pro-vaccine.
point, it's really purely based upon their word, and that's not typically the way we reach scientific conclusions.
Is it not? I was going to agree with her. I was going to agree with her and say, yeah, it's just based on their word. It's hearsay. People are just repeating what they're told. But that's exactly what we do here in the West. So it's crazy.
Meanwhile, the White House has announced yet another major deal with the drug maker. This one, a $1.5 billion deal with Moderna for 100 million doses of its experimental vaccine.
We're on track to rapidly produce 100 million doses as soon as the vaccine is approved, and up to 500 million shortly thereafter.
Worldwide, 25 vaccines are now in human trials.
Isn't it interesting how many times they use this number 6? Oh, Trump could be buying up to 600 million from all these different companies. There are 6 candidates for Operation Warp Speed. 6 feet apart for the social distancing. I don't know. I just keep seeing it. So I just wanted to show that clip. That was from today's YouTube channel. Next up, we have Snopes putting out its opinion, claiming it knows reality definitively. Could people be jailed, fined, for refusing COVID-19 vaccine in U.S., they ask. And I know what you want me to do, so I'm going to scroll down. Oh, true, they say. But let me point out, they change from the headline to the claim here. The claim that they're rating is, quote, individual U.S. states would be legally authorized to impose criminal penalties on individuals who refused to undergo a mandatory COVID-19 vaccination. Legally authorized to impose criminal penalties. So in essence, you're saying that refusing a medical treatment that somebody doesn't want makes them a criminal in this case? Those are quite the claims. I think that that is quite a stretch to say that somebody's a criminal for not agreeing with you and not allowing somebody to stick an experimental medication that's been untested long-term or even really short-term into your arm with a needle. So they don't even make any claims here about whether or not it's constitutional for there to be mandatory COVID-19 vaccines. I'm guessing they assume that it is. I think it is reprehensible to even to support this. So are they going to support everything that's legal? Because, I mean, if you don't know, Snopes is just a ridiculous site that does hit piece after hit piece after hit piece for people who are thinking critically, and they basically just back up the establishment, and they're spinsters. And now they're trying to put this out to scare people into compliance. And speaking of being spinsters for the establishment, look at what it does here. It says, Snopes is fighting an infodemic, which is straight up a World Health Organization term, of rumors and misinformation. And you can help. You can read our fact checks. You can submit, you can tattle on anybody who you see wrong thinking on the internet. And you can also donate, give them money. But look at this. It says, and please follow the CDC or WHO for guidelines on protecting your community from the disease. So Snopes is just going to give them a blanket pass and say, okay, yeah, we just yield all critical thinking to these international health organizations. I guess the CDC is more United States, but I think they meddle in international affairs. They're just basically saying, these people are infallible. We support them 100%. It's like you're supposed to be a fact-checking organization, which I would hope is to hold powerful people accountable. Like I'm sure they rag on Trump all the time on this site. Why don't we have the same scrutiny of forced medication here? And so I think there are a lot of people like me who look at Snopes like a counter indicator of morality or of truth. So that's kind of why I'm showing this. Let's look at what they're claiming here. It's basically the argument that we keep seeing. They source this Dov Fox guy who's making the same case as Alan Dershowitz, which is basically that Massachusetts versus Jacobson gives them the precedent to do whatever they want to us if we don't do whatever they want. It's like, really? That seems like that would be a terrible thing to allow a government to do. So anything that's in the collective benefit, according to the government, that the government says they have a solution for, everyone just has to go along with because it's illegal. That's basically the Snopes argument here. So wouldn't that same argument justify what the Nazis did, what the Soviet Union did, what North Korea did and does, and what all these terrible governments throughout history do to their people? You don't think people can just chalk it, you don't think they can warp it and justify it by saying, it's for the good of the rest of us. We can do whatever we want to the minority, it's for the good of the rest of us. Isn't that pretty much the most common excuse for all atrocities throughout history? People just say, oh, it's for the better good. I mean, I never agree with their assessment. It's basically just greed that people try to rationalize as humanitarianism. But we're seeing the same argument here, and they don't even realize what their words could be taken as. And they don't even understand that their words are basically a hollow echo of the tyrants throughout the halls of history. So I refuse it just on that grounds alone. Don't tell me that the collective good, as decided by a few, in this case, unelected officials, such as public health officers, don't tell me that they can decide who's to live, who's to die, who's allowed to travel, who's essential, who's non-essential, what are the punishments for not going along with their mandatory vaccinations, which do God and the devil knows what. Give me a break. So they're going through this article. We've covered it on the channel. Check out the last few videos where we go through this Dov Fox guy and how he cites the 1905 Supreme Court decision related to the smallpox vaccination, where they said that Massachusetts could impose a fine on Jacobson because he refused the vaccine that was deemed by the government to be for the collective good. So what are they going to do if they decide that you're breathing too much air? Oh, we have to get to carbon zero. We have to get to zero carbon emissions. Boom, boom, boom. Firing squad. Is that okay? It's for the collective good, man. No, fuck your collective good. Individual rights for the win. And I think that's worth the dying for. It won't be the first time somebody dies for their individual rights. Again, this case in 1905 was over a $5 fine that Jacobson didn't want to pay. Look at how they word this. The Jacobson decision was based in part on a long-standing principle known as the police power doctrine, which gives a state the authority to, in certain circumstances and within certain parameters. Oh, I'm sure. Where does throwing people in an oven fall? Is that within those parameters? Oh, I guess it's up to the government, right? They can limit the individual's rights of those living within its jurisdiction in order to protect the common good or preserve safety. I'm so sick of this common good and safety argument. Again, safety and security without freedom, without self-autonomy is slavery. Period. End of story. And people should be able to fight for their right to be free. People can fight for their right to be free. People have the right to be free all over the world. So they're citing martial law here. They're like, well, I guess if we can have curfews, we can have forced vax, right? It's all for the collective good. It's all for the collective good. Such a bad argument. All right, so that's the Snopes article, or fact check, or whatever they're calling it. The next two stories are about businesses all across the country that are just being closed by authorities for daring to go against the orders. Daring to go against the New World Order. Alcohol license suspended for 3 Orlando bars due to violation of coronavirus order, state says. I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it. I really hate this headline style. You know, where at the very end they throw in, comma, authorities say, comma, officials say, comma, state says, comma, scientists report. You know, whatever. It's basically just an appeal to authority. But yeah, I mean, I guess it is true that the license was probably suspended. But the real story here is totalitarian crackdown across the U.S. against private enterprise and the right of the people to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There, fixed it for you. Same idea here. New York gym that defied coronavirus restrictions get their license rescinded. 5-1 vote from their county or whatever in New Jersey to rescind their mercantile license. Man, I hate licensing in this country. The state takes away our rights to do what we should be allowed to do, and then they sell it back to us. And then they also just will come and take it away as a punitive measure against people who don't go along with the program, like these gym owners here, or like the bar operators in Orlando, or the hairstylists in Dallas, and the bar owners in West Odessa. The list goes on and on and on. It's in the millions of people who are being oppressed right now. Hundreds of millions, right? Everybody's being oppressed right now. Some people like it. Some people want to be abused, if the messaging's right. This came out yesterday, August the 11th, 2020. This is the same day that Kamala Harris was selected. Now, I do want to point out, Kamala Harris, if you look at her initials, K is the 11th letter, H is the 8th letter. So she was selected on 8/11, and her initials are 11/8. That's kind of interesting, right? It's almost as if they planned the announcement to correspond to a date with her initials, numbers. Trump, if you look at the alphabetic order and you add up each of the letters, comes out to 88. It's all very interesting to me. All right, but the headline here, this is coming out of the whitehouse.gov website. President Donald J. Trump is using every available resource to deliver a safe and effective vaccine to the American people. And they have this huge text at the top. It's a quote from Trump. Quote, under Operation Warp Speed, we've shaved years off the time that it takes to develop a vaccine. Wow, gee, thanks, Trump. And we've done it while maintaining the FDA gold standard for safety. End quote. Where have we heard that before? Didn't we hear that when all of the board members went before Congress?
I think we also agree that the standards put out by the FDA really are the gold standard, and we appreciate them being put out in advance, and we intend to measure ourselves against them.
To talk about the safety of their vaccines, the board members from companies like Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and the like, Merck, for instance. Didn't we hear this from Bill Gates and Fauci and a number of other prominent people in the media?
The side effects for the Moderna vaccine sound concerning. We looked. After the second dose, at least 80% of participants experienced a systemic side effect, ranging from severe chills to fevers. Are these vaccines safe?
Well, the FDA, not being pressured, will look hard at that. The FDA is the gold standard of regulators, and their current guidance on this, if they stick with that, is very, very appropriate. And you know, the side effects were not super severe. That is, it didn't cause permanent health problems for the things there. Moderna did have to go with a fairly high dose, and so to get the antibodies. Some of the other vaccines are able to go with lower doses to get responses that are pretty high, including the J&J and the Pfizer. And so there's a lot of characteristics of these vaccines. It's great that we have multiple of them.
Bill, the data showed that everybody with a high dose had a side effect.
Yeah, but some of that is not dramatic, where, it's just, super painful. But yes, we need to make sure there's not severe side effects. The FDA, I think, will do a good job of that, despite the pressure.
They keep telling us, well, if the FDA says it's okay, we have a miracle cure on our hands. Meanwhile, Russia says their vax is okay, and they're like, no way. No way. So they're just trying to paint this picture that the FDA approval means we have to do no further digging, no further skepticism is allowed, and people just have to roll up their sleeves. So a lot of this we've already covered. Let's pull out a couple of these bullet points, though. It says here, the federal government has already invested over $12 billion in 6 vaccine candidates, representing multiple pathways toward inducing effective immunity to COVID-19. 12 billion in 6 candidates. I don't know. I see 666 everywhere. If you break that 12 in half, I know that's crazy, right? So this section's called Delivering Vaccines and Treatments. Operation Warp Speed is a once-in-a-generation effort to ensure Americans have access to a COVID-19 vaccine. The project is on track to rapidly produce 100 million doses as soon as a vaccine is approved, and up to 500 million doses shortly after. So that's 600 million doses? Is the demand even that much? President Trump is committed to making the resulting vaccine accessible and affordable to the American public. I had a thought this morning. Isn't it funny that we keep hearing this push to make the vaccine free? And yet these same people are the ones who say there should be a fine or a tax penalty if people don't get it. So basically they're just saying we should completely manipulate the financial aspects of this product to siphon money from people who they don't like to people who they do like, and administer this forced medication that does God knows what to everybody. Quite the con there. So not a huge announcement other than it came out on August the 11th, 8/11. And it says that he is using every available resource to deliver a safe and effective vaccine to the American people. Just kind of a little eerie in my opinion. All right, the next article, coronavirus vaccine will be a dimmer switch, researcher says. A dimmer switch. What does that mean? So they mention how many scientists are skeptical about the safety of Russia's vaccine. Okay, so we're allowed to be skeptical if Russia makes a claim, but if the United States makes a claim, we all have to go along with it. Because the United States is completely trustworthy and Russia is not trustworthy. I just don't understand these people. They're like, well, if our scientists say something, you got to believe it. That's science. But if their scientists say something, that's just state propaganda masquerading as science. Huh. So you can see they're trying to reduce the expectations here. An ideal coronavirus vaccine would be protective, what scientists call sterile immunity, where the response is so strong that the virus can't establish a foothold within the body, he says. You mean like the definition of a vaccine? Nah, man, you're just not thinking deep enough. We can just shoot things in people's arms that just have minor benefits. Have you thought of that, Tim? But the immune system's response to a vaccine isn't always black and white. It's not like a light switch where it's off or on, he says. What are you, an idiot? Quote, it's more like a dimmer switch. Different vaccines provide various levels of immunity, he says. This seems like it coincides with what they keep telling us about only needing a 50% effective vaccine. They're like, if it's safe and 50% effective, yeah, I mean, force it for sure. It's like, really? It's a bit extreme. How do you know it's safe? Then there's the kicker at the very end. So this paragraph says, although many are anxious for a vaccine, Kennedy stresses that no compromises should be made to meet the demand, saying it would be a disaster if a vaccine was put on the market that caused harm or didn't work properly. But then he says, there's a sense of urgency, and there's a little bit of pressure to get this done and get it done properly, but get it done in the shortest amount of time as possible. And the faster we get it done, the more lives we'll be able to save. Well, unless you pump something out that's unsafe. All right, check this article out. California County will pay people diagnosed with coronavirus $1,250 to stay home. So if you can go and get a test and get found positive, or get a doctor, I guess, to diagnose you positive, $1,250, and you don't have to go to work, you can stay home, and nobody's going to mess with that because it's probably illegal to require you to go to work if you test positive. So people are just going to get tested because if it comes back positive, they hit the jackpot. They can probably continue to bill their employer, take sick time off, and then also, or maybe unemployment checks are coming in, and then they also get an additional $1,250 to stay home for 2 weeks. And then one last article here, Lyft may suspend service, Uber also, in California if court requires it to classify drivers as employees. I really hate this. Governments like California, or the United States federal government when they wreck private enterprise. We should be allowed to hire people to drive their car to where we need to go and let the free market decide what that's worth. And that's not what's happening here. So I feel bad for everybody in California. I mean, it's just all a big racket. We'll have to keep an eye on this. I'm a big user of Lyft, or I was before the world shut down. So let me know in the comments what you think about these people who are very skeptical of the Russia vaccine, yet are saying that we should be thrown in jail if we don't go along with their vaccine in 2 months when they say it's effective. Because a few scientists who are probably bought and paid for push out some propaganda. They say, well, we have found a few scientists that say this. What are you, a scientist? Do you have evidence that say that they're wrong? It's like, no, I don't trust them, and I shouldn't be forced to trust them. You can trust them, and if you're right, you benefit. If you're wrong, you suffer. That's on you, and it's on me. Part of me thinks the Russia vaccine skepticism is to make the second wave in just a few months look like, oh, they've done that much more due diligence. They wouldn't just tacitly endorse anything. They have standards, right? It's called the FDA. Have you heard of it? The FDA. They administer drugs. They are the gold standard, God's gift to nature. The FDA, I can't believe you haven't heard of them. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Keep in mind, everyone, small businesses are under attack. Let's all do whatever we can to support them. So make sure we support each other. Make sure that everybody out there has each other's backs, because it's, hard times, and it's getting harder.